I say something funny?
Ironic. We're big on irony around here.
This is a sign, Roxanne. There are no accidents. Destiny and all that.
Your soul is stained by the blood of the innocent. Feel their pain. No mercy. Sorry. All out of mercy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the latest episode of Heroic Efforts, a No More Talking production. Thank you for joining us once again. I am one of your hosts, Andy Foreman, and I am sitting here with Mr. Martin Fisher.
Oh, here to talk about another superhero movie. Oh, boy.
That is the theme of this this show, and much to the enjoyment of our other co-host, Mr. Nick Talamante.
Hey, what's up, everybody? And finally, yet another good movie. Can't wait.
Oh, yeah. We're talking about some Kino this week, everybody. If you didn't see it from the episode title, you're definitely going to hear us when we get excited about it, because this week we are talking about Nicolas Cage's first Ghost Rider film, directed by Mark Steven Johnson.
Cue like the 2000s. Cue the 2000s butt rock.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, man.
Perfect. So, everybody knows about this movie because it's Nicolas Cage. And this is, I feel like, one of the defining Nicolas Cage roles as far as at least the last 2 decades, because it's such an out there role as far as it's a Marvel superhero, it's a big monster, he acts freaking crazy in it. Like, it hits all the beats of like what would make it notable. So this is definitely going to have a lot of conversation, but we should go back to just sort of setting the groundwork. This Kino film, this Kino Marvel monster film. The Ghost Rider character is like one that's been around in Marvel for like quite a long time. I'm going to go through a quick bullet point. Originally published as a Western hero by Magazine Enterprises in the 50s, folded with the Comics Code, brought back by Roy Thomas because Roy Thomas is awesome. That didn't succeed because nobody liked Westerns in the 70s. Roy Thomas decided to use the name Ghost Rider as a Daredevil villain. Somebody else convinced him to do it as a hero because it's too good of an idea to waste on a villain. Thus, we got Johnny Blaze's Ghost Rider in the 1970s, illustrated by Mike Ploog, the legendary Mike Ploog. And you have a bunch of different 1970s pop culture things thrown into this character, where you have like biker gangs like the Hells Angels, you have like Evel Knievel, you've got Mike Ploog said that the suit was inspired by Elvis's leather suit in the Comeback special. You obviously like all the Satanism that was going on, like post-Manson family in the country that everyone was worried about. And then you also have like a character that sort of just wanders the earth, like a lot of the protagonists of 1970s shows. And I think it's fair to say that Martin and I have read quite a bit of 70s Ghost Rider. So Martin, is it fair to say that the structure of the Ghost Rider character very much follows the Bill Bixby Hulk narrative, at least initially?
Absolutely. No, most definitely. Every episode, or in this case issue, is essentially Johnny Blaze goes into some area and something's going on, and the Ghost Rider's going to find out what it is. And that's kind of the to-go method for every single issue, every story arc that goes on for the 70s run. I have read the complete 70s run thanks to the good old Marvel's Essentials line, which, if you're too young to remember what that was, it was a reprint of a lot of their classic comics, but made super cheaply, printed on newspaper edition paperwork. And without any of the color art, you just got like the pen ink illustrations, and it looked great, but you were missing out on like a kind of a key part of comic books sometimes. But it was cool because at least it provided like a cool, affordable way to read so many comics about a specific character. And in that line, Ghost Rider was one of the few characters who had his complete comic run published. And yeah, I read every single one, and let me tell you, like, nothing has left my memory quite as much as seeing an unnamed character that is exactly just supposed to be Jesus Christ walking around and, like, he interacts with the Ghost Rider. It's pretty great. The 70s were a wild time, man. And yeah, this absolutely is, like, if you like the Bill Bixby Hulk show, this is that in comic form, even more so than the Hulk comics were at the time. I highly recommend reading it.
because this really doesn't, Ghost Rider didn't really cross over with the Marvel Universe nearly as much as the Hulk did. Obviously, he teams up with Daredevil sometimes. There's like, I think he even does like a team up with the Champions at one point. There are it's obviously in the Marvel Universe, but because it was sort of that pocket area of like Moon Knight, Werewolf by Night, Ghost Rider, and so on and so forth. There wasn't really a lot of crossover, so there wasn't a ton of supporting characters for Ghost Rider than the way there was with the Hulk. So there's not the same type of like super heroic Hulk stories that there were at the time. It really is just like he's riding around on his motorcycle around America and there's a problem in a town, some corrupt politician. There's one where he fights a big shark out on the ocean. Like it's just, it's because Jaws was popular. It's like just everything that was popular in the 70s, they managed to work into a Ghost Rider comic. And because it's this guy sort of carrying this monster within him, the same as the Hulk, it's very much, it allows it to be metaphorical, but also a little darker and a little more adult. And also like just right out of the gate with that Mike Ploog art, it was an absolute banger and an instant classic. So obviously Ghost Rider's gone through a couple different iterations. By the time this movie came out, Danny Ketch was also one of the prominent Ghost Riders. It was basically Johnny Blaze and Danny Ketch. And Danny Ketch is actually probably the design that most people are familiar with because he's been used as the basis for this film. But we should also say that Nicolas Cage is a huge comic book fan. So he would know all of this. As everyone knows, he's supposed to play Superman. And as we would all love to see Tim Burton's Superman with Nicolas Cage, I do think that probably Ghost Rider is the ideal comic book role for him. Would you guys agree?
Yeah, I'd say just given this performance, which we'll get into with the film, I think he's certainly having a hell of a lot of fun on this one. And honestly, I think his weird Nicolas Cage-isms, they work for this character, maybe not 100% of the time. And again, we'll get into his performance later. But yeah, I think I enjoyed this performance way more than I think I might have with this Superman one. Just if he was, everything considered equal, if he was going to be doing similar things with this role, the character choices, I kind of think it works better here in Ghost Rider than potentially as Superman.
Yeah, I agree with that wholeheartedly. I do think, maybe like 90s era Cage could have done a Superman, but when Ghost Rider came out, it is the perfect like encapsulation of where Cage's career was at the time in the 2000s, his style of performance, what it was like. I think this is absolutely Cage at his peak 2000s performance right here, because he just goes ham all out on it. And a lot of like the weird eccentricities about Johnny Blaze in this movie are not really things from the comics, but I think it provides an interesting perspective from him, because a lot of these were just his idea, where it's like, oh, he's going to eat jelly beans, or he doesn't drink alcohol. He's a kid basically. And I think that's a really interesting idea for a character who in the comics, especially the original run, was so like morose and downtrodden into kind of like he's avoiding being that by surrounding himself by like childish things to like pick his spirit back up a little bit. That's such a unique idea, and only like a true thespian like Nick Cage would think of something like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's also worth noting that he was working with a director that would let him run like that. The great Mark Steven Johnson, who has also directed a film that we will be talking about someday, but we got to gear up for it because that is genuine comic book Kino, the Ben Affleck Daredevil film, which is, as a side note, a few years ago at my birthday, I threw it on. All my friends were over. Nick was there. He hadn't seen it. Like, had you even seen it before, Nick, or was this the first time?
No, I saw it back in the early aughts when it first came out. But rewatching it at your place was the first time in like over a decade I had seen it, and that's what truly won me over and like put me onto this like nutty idea you guys had for a podcast, because I was like, no, I get it. No, like just insert Danny DeVito. Like I get it now.
Oh my God. I get it.
Like this is what you mean, because this shit actually rocks.
Especially, the Mark Steven Johnson Marvel Comics duology definitely deserves a relook. And that is why we are talking about Ghost Rider today, because this movie is so much better than the memes would have you believe.
No, absolutely.
It is
1000%.
I think this was okay when we talk about like Nick Cage as a performer, and especially about the 2000s era for him. This was at the time where the memes were starting to pick up, where that culture was really starting to dig into him and use him a lot in your meme culture war, and putting gifs up, or assuming they even existed at that point. I don't know. This is 2007, so but at least you had the image, the still image in the big ass white text over it. So that was everywhere, and Nick Cage was the main one to use it. And you can make a whole video about like the good and bad that came from that for him as a performer. But I think this is like exactly what people think of when they think of crazy Nick Cage performance. But it's interesting because like we mentioned earlier, he's very nuanced actually in this. And I thought he did. We're gonna talk more about it, but I think Nick Cage is fantastic in this movie, and I'm so happy I got to watch it again because it's been so long since I paid attention while rewatching this movie. Like, probably 10 years maybe at this point, and I just really got to appreciate Nick Cage's his role in this film and how he handles playing Johnny Blaze in this film. And I'm so grateful he got a director like Mark Steven Johnson. It's just like, yeah, go for it, man, do what you want to do.
Yeah, and it shows. This I think is definitely like a lot of the films we talk about on this podcast, it's best case scenario for the version of this character that would have been made at the time. Because gearing up for this, I was doing just a little bit of research into the Ghost Rider movie development story. Apparently it was planned as early back as like 1992, to which I'm very glad that they didn't make it in 1992, because as cool as it would be to have like an early 90s Ghost Rider film regarding the tone, definitely wouldn't have been able to pull off the special effects at the time.
I do want to say that I feel like I'll be that one person that's like, man, I wish they had just done like some low budget 80s or early 90s Ghost Rider movie where it's like to the degree of like Dolph Lundgren's Punisher, where it's like it's basically just the character kind of in name and personality, but they couldn't pull off actually making it look like the comics. So when he's like Ghost Rider mode, he just puts on a fucking like cap or like a mask that's just a skull. I'm like, that's how they would have done it, to just completely circumvent having to set a dude's head on fire.
I hate that, but it's a funny thought because it's so funny upon this like rewatch, which I'm having a great time. Like, just spoiler alert, this movie fucking rocks. Like on a second viewing, after like more than fucking 15 years since I'd seen it, this movie fucking slaps. But I will say it's funny that you mentioned that, Marty, because in the scene where the like goth chick that he saves from the mugger, she's like describing to Eva Mendes, like a character in an interview, like, oh yeah, he was a dude and he had like a skull on, like fire. And like in my mind, and when she was speaking, I was just like, oh, like in a different kind of like movie, they would have done like a sketch artist have like a dude wearing, like, to rationalize it, instead of it being like a literal fucking burning skull, they probably would have rationalized it like, oh, it's a dude wearing like a mask or some shit like that with like a fire logo on it. So it's just funny that you had mentioned that, because that's where my mind went during that scene, and I'm so glad we didn't get that.
So, okay, Martin, you look like you have a point to make. I'm not going to joke.
I have no actual point. I'm just like, look, man, if you gave like Charles Band $400,000 to make a Ghost Rider movie in the 90s, this would have been it. That would have been it right there.
Yeah, okay, and Tim Thomerson would have played would either played Ghost Rider or would have played Crash Simpson.
Yeah,
like
exactly.
He would have played one of the two. Yes, now that you bring that up, I would have loved to have seen that. But as far as making something that actually translates the Ghost Rider character to screen, it is nice that they made it in this era, where, because we'll get into this later, but they didn't really perfect the Ghost Rider special effects until Spirit of Vengeance, where I don't think you could make a better on-screen Ghost Rider. But that's a future episode. Yes. We got to start at the beginning, which is the fact that this movie has a pretty simple plot, because I feel like most of what we're going to be talking about this in regards to this film is going to be about character and things that are not quite regarding the plot. So let me just run through the plot in literally 30 seconds.
Go for it.
the devil uses the Ghost Rider as a bounty hunter on Earth because it goes to capture souls that have been cast out of hell or escaped from hell. It's set up in the beginning that there was a Western Ghost Rider that betrayed the devil and is on the run from him. Then you cut to the semi-modern day. Young Johnny Blaze is performing in a carnival with his dad. They're motorcycle stuntmen, very evil Knievel. Johnny Blaze is in love with Roxanne Simpson, finds out that his dad has cancer, so he can't run away with Roxanne Simpson. He meets the devil, makes a deal with him. The dad dies anyway, but he's also cursed, so he runs away from Roxanne Simpson. Cut ahead to actual modern day of 2007, where Johnny Blaze is a successful stuntman. He meets Roxanne Simpson again, and right as he does, and they rekindle their romance, he becomes the Ghost Rider, and he has to go find the devil's son, Blackheart. Now that's pretty much the high and low of this.
Yeah.
That's pretty much the story. Once you get to about 45 minutes in, the story's done. Yeah. It's just cool Ghost Rider.
Good job, Andy. You actually did it, not 30 seconds, but you did do it in a minute, so good for you.
Okay, cool. I've only been watching this movie every couple of months since 2007. So I better have fucking remembered it. But speaking of starting at the beginning, we watched the extended cut, which is which has more of Mark Steven Johnson's material in it, same as the Daredevil extended cut, which got better reviews than the theatrical cut. I think that this film actually benefits from the extended cut treatment even more than Daredevil did, because honestly, I spent most of my life watching the Daredevil theatrical cut and loving it, and not finding anything wrong with it. Ghost Rider, I started with the extended cut, and then when I saw the theatrical cut, I'm like, oh wait, they expected people to get all these emotional moments with just this? It seems like it skips around so fast in the theatrical cut, but the extended cut is actually takes its time.
Yeah, that is definitely something I experienced, because I did see this in theaters when it came out, and I think this is what formed my opinion of the film for a very long time, was that a lot of the emotional beats are completely cut out of the film. It's quite literally, you get one introduction scene with the dad, and then he's got the cancer, and then it's oh, I don't have cancer anymore, and then he's dead. That whole 20 minute opening segment with Johnny Blaze as a young kid, that's cut down to maybe 10 minutes max. So you lose a lot of character work that happens early on that you need to make that movie work. The extended cut, I feel handles that a lot better. Getting to watch it and actually pay attention this time when I see the extended cut, it completely changed my opinion on the film overall. And yeah, I understand the critical consensus for the time with that version that people saw. It is a damn shame that they didn't release the real version of the movie, because I feel it wouldn't have gotten astronomically better reviews for the time period, but I think it at least would have improved the reputation the film has to this day, and maybe would have saved it from being a victim of the meme culture war.
I mean, this movie is meme central, regardless of which cut you watch. But the thing is, we were even talking about this before we started recording. So much of the heart of this movie comes from the first 20 minutes of the extended cut, because Brett Cullen as Barton Blaze, which, by the way, props to Mark Steven Johnson for just making it Johnny Blaze's dad instead of his adopted father that's Roxanne's actual dad. Yeah. Talk about truncating it and just making it simpler. Good choice. Good choice that
it gets rid of the weird thing about the original comics where Johnny Blaze is basically just trying to fuck his stepsister.
Yeah. and he was adopted by them when he was pretty young, too. So it's not like he was
kids. They were babies.
Yeah, it's not like he was Chris. It wasn't like Chris O'Donnell's Robin, where he got adopted 6 months before he turned 18, and you're like, all right, whatever.
You mean 30?
Yeah, exactly. No. This is a much better choice, but Brett Cullen sells every emotional moment in this movie, and I feel like we should definitely take some time on the devil section of this movie, because I think there's just a lot of emotional resonance with the first 20 minutes pre him meeting the devil, who, by the way, is played by Peter Fonda excellently, but we'll get to that, because Brett Cullen absolutely sells Barton Blaze. The heart of this movie is Johnny's relationship with his dad and his desire to get out of this carnival, and his relationship with Roxanne and where he thinks that could take him in life. And I think we should spend some time on these devil like 20 minutes or so of the extended cut, because it really is foundational to all of the emotion that is carried out through the rest of this film.
Oh, most definitely. I think the first 20 minutes of the film are so vital to carrying the emotional way through the rest of the movie, because I mean, once you get to like the present day stuff, it's a lot more just like, okay, you know, the romantic background of these characters. Now it's just gonna see the continuation of that. Essentially, they're not going to bother so much on the emotional aspect after that. That's why those first 20 minutes are so vital. And it's interesting, considering that like this was made by Columbia Pictures, Sony, with a good old cigar chomp and Avi Arad behind the director, watching every step. I can see him being the one to be like, it needs to be more sincere. You got to make it more emotional here, because he was a big pusher of that, I feel like, on this movie, because he loves his silly toys and everything like that. But I do think he does try to push for an emotional heart at this point in his career. And it's funny because it's like, it feels like those first 20 minutes, depending on how you view it, can feel almost like, I don't want to say sickly sweet, because it is just, you're like, I'm watching a Ghost Rider film. Where's all the blood and tits and all that fun stuff? But it's not what they go for. They are going for the Spider-Man-ish route of just getting you emotionally invested in these characters before you get to the super heroics. And that's why it's like, you know, when you're truncating, you know, what is like 3 issues of an origin story for Ghost Rider into this, you know, tight 20-minute narrative, I think it works so well. And the tragedy behind, you know, what happens with Brett Cullen's character as Johnny's father, I think is fantastic. I mean, it's a tale as old as time when you talk about a story with like the devil, and where it's like, oh, you make a deal with the devil and the devil always wins anyway. You know, and I love that they carry that over. And, you know, we'll go more into his performance too, but Peter Fonda as the devil is fantastic, I thought, in this, you know.
Kills it, absolutely kills it.
Absolutely kills it. And, you know, even from like a cinematography perspective, just the shot of him walking past the tent, you just see like the little cartoonish devil thing like in the shadows following along with them. That's how he actually looks or whatever. That's great. That's Kino right there. That's cinema, baby.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
You know what's funny? The director's commentary, Mark Steven Johnson is talking about it, and he says like that shot in like a lot of test screenings and stuff, he would hear people in the audience go like, did you see that? What was that? And it just, even in my head, like, this is Kino, I love this, but I'm just kind of thinking, I'm like, what fucking audience member like doesn't get that that's the devil? like I'm like, it's like the most obvious like thing of all time, and I'm not putting it down because Mark Steven Johnson is like a king at this comic book melodrama, but like it. What audience? Like, maybe this is why this didn't get great reviews, because it was being seen by audiences who didn't get that the creepy shadow on the wall was the devil. Like,
who's the blonde guy in this movie? I don't get why he's here. Why is he here?
Yeah, so it's like maybe it was at a disadvantage from the start based on the audience it was trying to be marketed to. But regardless, the film starts with Johnny, and you brought up a good point. It's like very syrupy sweet. Johnny is in love with Roxanne, but I would say, yes, it is a little over the top, but this is a comic book movie.
Oh, yeah.
This is a comic book in the same way, and I'm not comparing it tonally, but like in the same way when Joel Schumacher talks about Batman Forever and he goes, we have made a comic book on live, you know, in live action. That's what Mark Steven Johnson is doing with this. If you read all those Silver Age Marvel comics, they have the same amount of like sappy melodrama, but it's great because it's a superhero story. It's a power fantasy. It is a fantasy. Like, it's not supposed to be like some super gritty, realistic thing.
Oh yeah.
You can do that. You can do that with Ghost Rider, but that's not what this is. This is a big cartoon.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I do want to hit on with this movie, and one of the many reasons why, especially after the second viewing, I'm like, this is amazing. It's actually genuinely like a good time. It's a fun ride. Like I always said, I hate most of this Cape shit, but when the movie knows what it is and embraces it, it's sincere about it, and it leverages the best aspects of it, which is a fun time. Then when you have things like this, you know, melodramatic, emotional start to the film that's like, you know, bordering on sappy, it works. It like, I didn't find myself cringing during this. I didn't find myself being like, oh God, like rolling my eyes on it, because the film just embraces what it is, and I'm invested. Like you feel for Johnny and his relationship with both Roxanne and his father, and it just sets it up where you're like, I'm in for a good ride. I already know like they're setting up the dominoes to knock him down, but I'm here for it. You know, it's a little difficult to explain, but I just think that movies that don't take themselves too seriously, and I think that's a great point that you made, Andy. Like when they realize they're making a fucking comic book movie, all right, we're not making the next like Oscar bait. Like it knows what it is, it knows exactly what it is. We're making cape shit, but when you embrace that and you have fun with it, and you again leverage the best aspects of it, especially when it comes to the visual and the cinematography, which we can get into, then you get what you have here, which is a great fucking time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's funny you bring up when I bring up like the sickly sweet and the melodrama of the movie, it's not, I don't want it to come off as like, oh, it's a knock against the movie. Not at all. I do think it's a strong point. It's just not, I think, what people expect from this genre anymore. They expect like, if you're going to have like some romance, it's going to be some quippy back and forth, will they, won't they bullshit or whatever. Or, and when you bring up the melodrama, it's interesting because it's like, yeah, when you have these sappy moments, what helps sell that is the world feels like they know they're in a comic book, but they're embracing that fact. They're loving that fact. That's what works for the Sam Raimi films. That's what works for usually the best kind of films in the genre, and the worst kind of ones are the ones that, look at you and go like, isn't this all just ridiculous? I mean, like,
it's the sincerity.
It's the sincerity. Absolutely. We can name a million productions that are like that to this day. I mean, one that I always think of is like, hey, yeah, the king of the soap opera for teenagers was the CW for 14 years or whatever. And the unfortunate thing about a lot of their superhero shows was they they took it serious in the wrong way. They didn't take it serious in the sense like, this is comic books, this is ridiculous, but we're going to treat it with sincerity. They did the whole, isn't this just ridiculous? Wink, wink. And that was the whole
It's the fucking looking at the camera and winking, man. I can't stand that shit.
Exactly. And you get that for thousands of episodes, basically. So that's what benefits a film like this, is they treat it like, yeah, this is a comic book and we're going to fucking love that.
There's no winking in this. No. Everyone's playing it completely straight, and we should talk, before we get into like the modern day aspects of the movie, we should definitely talk about that scene with Brett Cullen and Johnny Blaze. The actor who played young Johnny Blaze, his name escapes me at the moment, but between Barton and his son Johnny, where he realizes that his son is going to run away with his girlfriend, and he really gets angry at him, and he's like, oh, these, you two kids with nothing, like, this is a terrible idea or whatever. And Johnny just kind of lashes out at him in what I think is probably the first time he's ever expressed these emotions to him, because it seems like he's pretty buttoned up at the beginning, but he just says, he's like, well, I want something better than just being at this stupid carnival for the rest of my life. And like, it's a pretty emotional scene. They both sell it. And then right as Johnny is about to leave, the dad, being typical great comic book, mentor, tosses him the keys to the Harley, to the chopper, and he's like, you take this and you go live a life that you want to live, like, and he's like, and I'm giving you my blessing. You're like, damn, this is good. Like,
oh man,
yeah, this is like, because it's like a real scene.
Oh yeah, and I think that really underscores that is the performance in that scene. For me, what really stuck out on this rewatch was the little delay that Barton does, like right after he tosses Johnny the keys to the Harley. He has this moment where he's kind of like, going back and forth, and then he kind of has this long, like, they hold the shot and he's just like kind of staring at Johnny, and then he turns away and he just kind of like smiles to himself, like, it's very if you want to be a dickhead, you could be like, oh, this is hokey, but like, I think in my opinion, it holds on to the emotional moment of that the emotional beat of that scene and that performance, and it really sells it. Like, that moment right there really stuck with me, where I was just like, okay, that, like, this is him being like a real father, you know what I mean? And it really sells the entire emotional current, which again sets it up for the tragedy that plays out like right after. But I'm really appreciative of them letting that scene breathe, and letting my man cook in that performance, because I think it does a hell of a job.
Yeah, and the only thing I wish that they had gone a little harder on, and I get that this is PG-13, is I wish that the death of Barton Blaze would have been a little bit more graphic, or hit a little bit harder, because it is done in this kind of like weird slow-mo way where everyone's like, oh no, and like, I know I was talking about comic book melodrama, but I wish it would have been a little like harder hitting.
Well, it's done in the slow-mo way, and then unfortunately they do show him after the crash, and he just has like some Wile E. Coyote soot on his face, and he's just like,
yeah.
That's the weakest part of that of Brett Cullen's performance, just because they really probably should have just like, not shown him and just been like, yeah, he's dead, basically.
That's what I wish would have happened as well.
That's the downside of some of these movies that are embracing like the comic book aspect of it, is sometimes certain moments that need to hit harder are a little shortchanged. But you know what? I will take that any day. Like, I will take those slight shortcomings with the true sincerity any day over some other films that we don't need to get into right now. But then, of course, he sees the devil again with the great cartoonish devil face that jumps at him.
Stock image of the
God,
devil that pops up for a split second.
It's like, whoa,
God, that
like
rocks.
I'm pretty sure like Martin has that image like just on one of his editing softwares. Like it's just like a plug-in. Like it's like just type in how
Type in the devil on Google. It's the first image that pops up.
you type in Halloween and like stock image, and that's what comes up. But anyway, like a big cartoonish devil runs at him, and then he sees Peter Fonda as Satan, who is just dripping with evil. It's so good. And he's like, forget about love, forget about family, forget about blah 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 blah, because you're mine now. Like he's just loving it. And
Almost
Peter Fonda's never read
he's saying he's like, forget about family.
Peter Fonda's never read a comic book in his entire life.
Oh, God, no.
I know they probably do like a comic book. You mean like the Adam West show? Like,
Right.
and that's basically what he's doing, and it's great.
Oh, absolutely.
Oh yeah, like before we move on to like the modern part of like the movie or like the rest of the film, I should guess you should say, I really want to drill down on an aspect of the beginning, not just Peter Fonda's performance, which was it's amazing, it's incredible, he sells the hell out of it, but the cinematography in this movie overall, but especially in the beginning, really kicks fucking ass, dude. Like again, on this rewatch, I'm like, damn, this looks good. There's some good ass shots in this. You know, we alluded to it earlier with Andy talking about how the devil's shadow, being like the monstrous form, and then Peter Fonda's like walking alongside it. But I really love that long shot of him walking through the carnival and all the fucking lights start popping as he's like going by. And then when he first encounters Johnny to propose the deal to him, we get that like big, red cartoony like devil sign over like the entrance to like one of the carnival tents. And he's just like groovy or, something like that. He just says like a one liner like that. And it
just laughs at it. It's great.
Yeah. And again, I'm pretty sure he says like, right on or some shit like that, but it was really good. And then later on in the scene that you were just talking about, I love the crossroads scene with like young Johnny when the devil finally like kind of claims him. That crossroads scene is awesome. Not only is it reference to the devil in the crossroads, but it's just the shot of it. I think that scene really kind of cements this pseudo western vibe that the movie is going for, and I think nails honestly. Like I love this kind of like arid badland with like a storm rolling in the background, so the sky's all gray and fucked up, and then Johnny just crashes at the crossroad, and then that's when the devil like takes him, and it's just that whole scene is great. Just like how Marty said, he's almost like licking his ears with like the way he's just kind of whispering from side to side and just taunting Johnny Blaze, let him know like his soul is his. It just rocks, and I think it does a great job of setting up the aesthetic of this film, which even after all these years holds up pretty damn well. And we'll get into it more, but like honestly, like I love the look and feel of this movie. It's oozing an early aughts energy, but it still fucking slaps, I think.
Right. Well, there's a couple of points I'd like to make before we move on to the they're just quick points, but that I'd want to make before we move on to the modern day with Nicolas Cage. One, I love that you brought up like the pseudo-Western vibe, because getting back to how we described the original 70s comics, they very much are Western comics. It's basically the man with no name riding into town and solving a problem, because almost all of it takes place in like desert locations, at least the early issues for sure, right, Martin? I'm not incorrect.
There are especially like the first, I want to say like 20 issues are almost exclusively desert locations, and it's after that he starts to go to like a beach location or a carnival, that kind of thing. A lot of those are like I think one of the first villains he fights is this might be culturally insensitive, a Native American serpent person. So it's one of the first villains he fights, and it's in the desert. So yeah, the desert plays a big impact, and it is the Western setting for sure.
Much of the Ghost Rider comics of the 70s, like the original Johnny Blaze run, do not take place in cities, which I think is important too. Like, even when he gets out of the desert, he's either in a forest or it's like like you said, an isolated carnival somewhere. So it very much has this Western vibe, which I think leads into my next point, which is that Christopher Young's score for this is like a character into itself. This is one of the best comic book scores, and the man did this and Spider-Man 3 in the same year. Like, talk about two fucking banger scores back to back. Because, like, that intro where, like, the camera is zooming through the Ghost Rider logo, and you just get that, like, pounding. It's Western, but it's, like, horror at the same time, like really like operatic horror. Like it has like vibes of like Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula score.
Time, yeah. The score of it, absolutely. It's funny you bring up like this. There is the Western vibe for sure, but from a other genre perspective, it's really interesting because it molds the horror with kind of the motorcycle film of the 60s and 70s. I mean, like that's why they cast Peter Fonda as the devil, because he was an easy rider, which is one of the most influential motorcycle films ever made. It borrows a lot from that kind of genre, and there's also that weird subgenre that does exist. There's not a lot of those kind of movies, but there is like the motorcycle horror film, because there's like Werewolves on Wheels, which is a great poster. Y'all should look it up. It's better than the movie, but it's great. Where it's like, like the Satanism mixed in with the motorcycle gang and all of that. It's so cool, and I love that this film embraces that so much. I think there's so many little genre things that it plucks from that really benefit it. And Christopher Young's score, like you said, is fantastic. I mean, we'll get to it when we get to the modern day stuff, but the Ghost Rider transformation, man. Oh man.
Oh man.
Yeah. We're gonna have to steel ourselves for that, because that is like one of the all-time comic book scenes. But we do have to talk about the intro to Nicolas Cage first. Last little tiny note that like is not even a discussion, but just a detail I liked. When Johnny signs the contract, he just like scratches his finger and the blood falls on it. It's not like he even willingly makes the decision, and the devil's like, "That'll be just fine." I'm like, yes, like that's cartoon devil, because like the whole thing of like the whole way he gets around it is he's like, "Oh, you said you'd save my dad." He's like, "No, I said it'd cure his cancer. I didn't say I'd save him from anything else." And you're like, damn. And especially like when I first discovered this film in like third grade, I'm like, shit. Like, yes. Like I was so excited. I'm like, damn, that's fucking awesome. So then he leaves Roxanne behind because he sort of got roped into this deal with the devil because he doesn't want her around. He doesn't want her hurt. Then you cut to modern day, and Johnny Blaze is Nicolas Cage in one of his better wigs, and he's
one of the best ones for his career.
Yes, exactly, and he is jumping lots of trucks and stadiums and stuff, and like Evel Knievel, even though nobody was doing that in 2007. Like that was not a thing that was happening.
And I think it's important to mention this film takes place in Texas, where that is still very much a thing out here.
That's a very good point. But they make it into like this like Tony Hawk style character, where like there's a video game made about him, and they're like selling out whole stadiums to watch him just like jump. Like
do one jump.
And we should mention that the big jump that he does is set to Crazy Train.
Which is awesome. He like, pushes his hands up,
fire
and there's
shooting everywhere.
Oh yeah.
But it's cool that Mark Steven Johnson is able to integrate the sort of arbitrary stunt writer aspect of his character from the comics. So you have to maintain that. You have to keep that. That's Ghost Rider. I think it's cool that he integrates that in a character way where Johnny Blaze has lived his entire life just waiting for the devil to come back to claim him. But he says in these few moments where he's jumping and he's like so close to death, like he's like, those are the few moments in his life where he feels like nothing can touch him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a great aspect of it, like him just kind of, don't be afraid kind of like moment when he's just having that moment of pure just clarity and bliss when he's like, that on the very precipice of death. But one thing I really do appreciate about this, I think overall the character and what they do with it is just kind of how you alluded to after his Faustian deal, like he doesn't know about the whole Ghost Rider thing. He doesn't know the devil's going to come and like, turn him into a flaming fucking rider to like go hunt down like damn souls. All he is thinking with his little Faustian deal is like, oh, the devil's going to like take me to hell. Like when I die, die. He's just going to come and claim me in that classical sense. So I don't know. That's just a neat aspect of like the character and the story that I just really appreciated, where he doesn't know what's going to happen. So he's living in this almost pseudo permanent state of anxiety, and like he's both simultaneously like running from the devil but also just being right on his doorstep by doing just crazier and crazier stunts because he has this internal guilt about like what happened to his dad and everything like that, and he blames himself. So he's just right there on the verge of life and death, and and living in damnation, just because he's trying to kill himself but he's trying to outrun the devil, and I just love that dichotomy of the character.
Donald Logue as his little buddy has a great line where he's like playing the video game, he crashes, and Nicolas Cage goes, "Have you tried not crashing?" And he just looks at him and goes, "Have you?" That's great. That encompasses the entire relationship.
Well, he goes like, "Yeah, how are you still alive?" He goes, "It's luck." And he goes, "I have a dog named Lucky with one eye and no nuts." He's like, "This isn't luck." Like, what a great Donald Logue sells it. Probably won't talk about Donald Logue too much, but he is like fantastic as Mac.
As a number one Donald Logue stan, I'll just tell you, man, like the fact that he's so great in Blade, so great in Ghost Rider, and so good as Detective Harvey Bullock in Gotham, like I love this man and everything he's in.
Oh yeah, no, he is getting cast in whatever low budget comic book movie we eventually make.
Yeah,
like I don't care what it like. I don't care if we're making a Silver Surfer movie; he's gonna be in it. Anyway, like they have that fantastic scene where they go up into Johnny Blaze's loft, and you just get so much character just from the set design, where it's like tons of motorcycles everywhere, but like motorcycles that are being propped up by religious texts that are just littering his apartment. And then he has like jelly beans that he drinks out of that he eats out of martini glasses while he's watching like 40s Fleischer cartoons, which again, like you brought up, is totally Nicolas Cage's idea. Yeah. But he's like, my thought of this is, if you were somebody that made this kind of deal and you knew the devil was coming for you, you would try to remain as innocent as you possibly could for as long as you could, and just stay away from all kind of sin and temptation. So he doesn't drink, he doesn't do drugs, he doesn't.
It's funny you bring that up, because I mean Donald Logue does have that line of like, this place could use a woman's touch, and Johnny is someone who definitely has not had a woman's touch up to this point. So
yeah, I mean, it's definitely fair to say that he probably hasn't had sex since since before his dad died. And he got possessed by the devil. Because he's like a teenager. He's like, look, it's very ambiguous how old they both are because of the actors that they cast, but they're supposed to be like teenagers to young adults. Like, I really hope like he had a decent sex life before he sold his soul to the devil, because that would really suck if he had to wait until he was like Nicolas Cage's age in this movie to get any kind of action at all. That would suck.
You think he was trying to do like the born again hoe thing, where he was just like, well, look, I haven't had sex in like decades, so therefore I'm a virgin again. You think it's his mentality? He's like, if the devil can't take me because I'm a virgin now. I haven't gotten pussy in 25 years. I haven't had no pussy. I've been pussyless and holeless.
And you know what? The devil returns right when he meets Roxanne again and is going to go out on a date with her.
See, he's like, you shouldn't have tried to get your rocks off.
Yeah. Like,
I killed your dad, so it would be the big boner killer. Come on, man.
What if right before he went on the date with her, like in a There's Something About Mary kind of way, like he like jerked off just to keep himself calm, to calm himself down. But that was like the first time he had jerked off in like 25 years, so it's like
that's when he turns into the Ghost Rider. Is right when he does that.
Like the devil is in hell, and he hears just like. And he's like, "Oh, Johnny Blaze has been tempted again. It's like, I'm coming back."
It's like as soon as he's done, he looks at himself in the mirror, and that's when the steam starts to come off of his skin, and he starts to change.
You think he's in there on his old 2007 computer, like with his pants around his ankles, like he's got red tube in the search bar, and he's like, "You can't live in fear."
Oh man, it's 2007. He's got that Quicken video downloaded, buddy.
Yeah, he's on there. He's going on there. You porn, and he's like got the hand hovering again above like the enter button. Can't live in fear. Like
he's just waiting for 30 minutes just to see like the titties load on the page, and then as soon as he does, Peter Fonda just like appears behind him, and he's just like, "You failed No Nut November, Johnny."
You are now the Ghost Rider.
God.
So before we should get back to a more sincere part of this movie before we get back into Johnny Blaze's celibacy. Um, there's that great scene, again, the same scene where he's sitting there with Mac and he's talking about his dad and his accident and everything. And he goes, and he just has that great line where he's like, if someone makes a mistake, a really big mistake, he goes, do you think that person should have to pay for it every day for the rest of their lives? And like on rewatch, and with the sincerity that Nicolas Cage delivers it with, and like the comic book melodrama that's not winking at you, I'm like, that is a far more emotionally impactful character moment than anything that has been in most recent comic book movies outside of like the Batman.
Yep.
Like it really, really resonates because you're just like, oh my God, this dude has been living with this for like 25 years, just constantly tormented by it.
Yeah, I think it does a fantastic job of like the self-flagellation that, and again, you know, like I kind of talked about earlier, like he's just been carrying this weight this whole time for like what he thinks he did to his dad. And again, the self-flagellation of him just every day going out there and like on a subconscious level trying to kill himself, you know what I mean? Like in hoping to find some redemption in that, but then he still has that willpower like in him, or that part of him that's just like, you know, holding out hope that maybe he can get out of this somehow, that maybe he is deserving of redemption. And again, just that, I love that dichotomy, and I think Nicolas Cage does a great job, especially in scenes like this, of selling that nuance of this character, where on one hand, on one shoulder, if you will, he's got the devil, you know, tempt him, and he wants to fucking kill himself. He wants to die. He's like, I hope I crash and burn in one of these stunts. And on the other hand, he's just like holding on to like that faint kind of echo of his dad, of like, you know, giving him the approval to run away and to be something, and trying to use that to motivate himself to, you know, maybe somehow if he does one more big stunt, if he, you know, keeps riding on, if he, you know, achieves something, some kind of level of fame, that maybe he can make up for like what he did. And I love that. And I think, like you said, the sincerity of not looking to the camera, giving a fucking wink and a shitting grin in moments like that really sell the emotional beat that half of these fucking movies nowadays wish they could, you know, when it comes to this Cape shit.
His dad gave him the last thing his dad ever did was give him his approval to run away. And after realizing he had made a deal with the devil, he spends the rest of his life running away. Yep. Boom, right there. Mark Steven Johnson was fucking cooking with this shit, man. Awesome. So, just as a side note, he gets reunited with Eva Mendes almost immediately. Like,
yeah.
I mean,
she's a journalist at this point, so
it's been decades, like in the narrative of the film, but it's like 5 minutes after he leaves her. Like, it just cuts ahead.
Their relationship doesn't even skip a beat, because as soon as they see each other again, they're just like, you know, she's trying to be professional, do an interview, and he's just like, oh, you know, I missed you. I heard you got married. And then she goes like, that never happened. And they keep going. It's like, yeah, she's still fucking falling for him immediately.
Okay, because here's the thing, is like, we're all in our like mid-20s right now. Like, that seems like something that could very realistically happen between people that are maybe in their late 30s to early 40s that have not seen each other since like early high school, or like late high school, or college, where it's like you sort of see them and you've all been through life, and just all of a sudden like it all just comes washing back in out of nowhere.
This one's for the fellas and the ladies that didn't marry their high school sweethearts or met the love of their life in college. We're here for you.
Exactly. Yeah. It is okay to Google you porn. You will not turn into the Ghost Rider if you do. Yeah. No. But yes, it is very sincere as far as their relationship goes, because it feels realistic. It feels very much like two people that could have been together, and they are just sort of being faced with like all these wasted years of not being together, you know? And so they decide to go on a date in a great scene where Nicolas Cage just sort of chases her down on the freeway and keeps doing motorcycle stunts until she says yes. Yeah.
It rocks.
Yeah, it's really, really it's really charming. And, you know, Nicolas Cage, he looks at her, he's like, you still like Italian? He pronounces it Italian. And she's like,
Let's get some dinner. You still like Italian?
and then he just like kisses her on the road, and then she's like, 8 o'clock. And he just goes, yes!
There's a restaurant in my hotel, the Plaza. 8 o'clock.
Yes! And you're just like, you're like this is all very realistic because I don't care how old you are as a dude, you do feel like that. But this definitely is like a 10-year-old's power fantasy as well.
Oh, absolutely. Oh
yeah.
I just want to say as a quick aside, in the making of special features for this movie, I love that like he improvised the Italian bit because they did like 20 takes of him saying something else, and he goes like, "You still eat catfish?" And she goes, "All the time," and they didn't use that take, but.
No, I found
Catfish is nuts.
Right.
Yeah, you still yeah. You still like barbecued pork fried rice? Like it's like I don't.
He just hit her with like something like crazy. He's just like, you still like pad thai? You know what I mean? Just like these two fucking born and raised Texans.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you still like?
Honestly, I would have.
Do you still like the burn Taco Bell gives you?
I would have loved it if he just hit her with like something like completely out of left field. He's like, you still like that one halal place? He's just like, I know you love shawarma. I know you love that baba ganoush.
Oh no, that'd be a callback to Batman Begins.
Yeah.
Well, they don't like falafel. Yeah. Anyway,
very charming scene.
Yeah. So anyway, Nicolas Cage jerks off, and then he's about to go on a date with her, and that's when the devil comes back to claim him, and it leads to one of the most awesome comic book transformation scenes you've ever seen.
We're gonna get to that transformation, but I think it's important that we cover first. Right before he calls upon him, the reason he does is because the son of the devil, Wes Bentley himself, has appeared on the scene and is murdering a bunch of people in a random middle of nowhere bar.
It's literally like it. So he just like emerges out of like a rainstorm of fire, which is cool.
Great,
and it's worth it. Yeah, we definitely have to mention that this is somehow Wes Bentley's best comic book film, like because we love this. This is definitely Kino, but it's like his only two comic book films have been like this and Jonah Hex, and it's like Jesus Christ,
where he gets manhandled by John Malkovich.
Yeah, he gets to be a little cooler in this. Somehow he gets to be cooler in this in like Edward Cullen pancake makeup and like
in a total twink face for him.
Yeah, exactly. I think that we can get into Wes Bentley a little bit later, but I do think that he's sort of it's 50-50 on if he's good or not, because I think that opening scene where he goes to the biker bar is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
Because like well that biker's sitting there and he's like some asshole, you know, and like the hot waitress comes out and he's like, why don't you get me another beer? And he like smacks her ass and shit, and then like she's like, you jerk, and walks back in, and then she's like he's standing out there on the porch with his beer, and then all of a sudden you just see it grow like super cold, like you see the frost go over it. You're like, that's awesome. And then he immediately picks a fight with like Edward Cullen, and but the thing is Blackheart has this really cool power where he like can just basically inject you with brimstone, and these people turn into like these emaciated blue mummies. It's so creepy.
It's such a cool power, and it makes his little cool man group with him so much lamer when it's like you've got Waterman showing up, Muscle Guy, and then the whitest Bob Marley you've ever seen.
yeah. Well, also, like, Martin saw Madam Web. I just saw Madam Web last night. They just ripped off his power for Ezekiel Sims.
They did, yes.
It's the same goddamn power.
The poison touch.
Yeah. So, anyway, so he takes out a whole biker bar full of people. Like, the waitress is hiding underneath the bar, and she tries to run away, and he's like, boo. Because it's literally like a whip. So, like a close up of Wes Bentley's face. He's like, boo, and like grabs her and like just turns her into a mummy. Like, and so then
this evil blue twink is just going on a rampage, and he's so fun. He's so fun in this. I don't think he's good, but I think he's fun in this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so then he has like his cronies show up, which is basically just they're just they're not from the comics. They're not even from I think the Bible. They're just like stuff Steven Johnson invented, which is kind of cool. They're basically they're angels that fell from heaven that wanted to hide from God in Earth's elements.
Well, considering that Blackheart comes from hell, he is fire. You have earth, wind, and air, or earth, wind, and water. So you get all the elements with them, I guess.
Yes, and also like Keep going.
Yeah, I'm just gonna say it. It's lame. It's one
Yeah.
of the lower points of the movie. Like, I think it's lame as shit. The setup, see, when Andy just said it right now, angels fell from heaven and they're trying to hide from God in the elements. That sounds cool. Like when you
Yes.
say it out
Yeah.
or like on paper, like that's a cool concept. It's just an
Mhm.
execution. It's like his three goons are not only the biggest fucking jobbers like I've ever seen in any of these Cape movies, and we'll get into it later, but like they're also like, and this kind of goes for all the quote unquote like bad guys in this whole movie, like even like the low level thugs and whatnot. It's the most like fucking 90s ass like antagonist I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
If you have watched a single Dragon Ball Z animated movie, it's like those like supporting villains that are just there to say some quips and get killed after 20 minutes. So
but they look like every Saturday morning cartoon like idea of like a quote unquote a punk or like a tough or a ne'er-do-well, like just like the lamest fucking 90s like goons you've ever seen.
I also, being the one that watched the fucking 90-minute making of documentary, it is very funny to me that they like got like illegally procured like fish skin to make their suits, which is really funny to me. I'm like, the costume designer is like, she's like, I don't want to say too much, but there were some deals where we had to go to a hotel room with like a briefcase full of money and nothing was said, and we got what we needed and we left and we made their outfits out of it. And I'm like, what?
It's also unfortunate for the VFX artists that they had to animate a guy made out of sand in the same year that Sam Raimi had $300 million and Thomas Hayden Church to make a man made out of sand. It's like wow, talk about like fighting a losing battle. Like talk about losing the battle before you've even started.
They're both for Sony. They should have just gone next door and be like, can we lift some of this?
Can we just borrow this? Can we borrow all of this corn that you're using as sand, like on set? So basically that's the setup of the villain. There's not really that much to the villain, so we're not going to be talking about him that much after this. But it leads us to the fucking awesome Ghost Rider transformation scene. Where with Christopher Young's score is fucking banging, and he's like as soon as that clip starts where it's like riding behind him on the motorcycle, you hear like that dun dun, and like he gets thrown. Me and my brother used to reenact this, and we had every grunt and movement down, like he's just like he's like as he's like fires bursting from his asshole.
There's so much great filmmaking that I think a lot of people can learn from just this scene alone. Is like, hey, you get such a cool fucking shot of just going around Nick Cage as he's looking at the camera. You go around him in a circle, but also you cut out the ground and put a little like rotating ground to go along, so he's moving and rotating at the same time as the camera's just going a little bit faster around him. It's so fucking cool.
Well, he gets thrown off. He picks himself up off the ground, and there is smoke pouring out of his eyes, and he's like, whoa, and he stands up, and he's like doing the werewolf thing. Like you can tell Nicolas Cage has always wanted to play like a transformative monster. The closest he got was like a vampire's kiss.
Yeah, there's a great another bit with the behind the scenes where Nicolas Cage is watching his performance when he's doing like a transformation bit, and he's literally screaming, "Monster movie, monster movie!"
With that level of passion, and so like they have that where his boots are walking on the ground, and there's like fire, like
yes,
and then
that was practical effect. They actually set his feet on fire for that shot, and it was Nick Cage.
So awesome. And then he screams, and the camera goes into his eye, and then it's a series of transformations where he's like screaming as like you see like fire poking out from underneath his skin, and Christopher Young's score is like going with like the chorus music where it's like like the fucking giant chorus is going. It sounds like Bram Stoker's Dracula, and then Nicolas Cage cuts from screaming to laughing because he goes, at that moment, Johnny Blaze is gone, and the Ghost Rider is laughing because he is free. And you're like,
yeah.
Like, I love
this whole scene fucking rocks, dude. Like as a whole, I think the special effects of this film hold up decently well. Like they don't look that bad. And honestly, like this transformation scene, I love it so much because it's Nicolas Cage is getting to cook. It's just him doing all his like weird little quirky decisions and choices for his performance, but I think they fucking work so well for this. Like him screaming in pain and then like transitioning seamlessly, because Cage is the fucking king, like seamlessly switching over to like maniacal laughter. It works so well for him, like literally being possessed by like the spirit of vengeance. And his eyes are on fire at that point, and then his skin is melting in between like pain screams turning into laughs. And like it's got some Raimi energy to it, with like the kind of pseudo horror elements of it, and I think it fucking rocks because it's one of the, especially for the time, especially for the budget, I think they fucking nail it for his transformation. Even though I feel like it lands not perfectly, just because I think he looks a little silly with his shoulders being a little too high with the skull, like when he has that final shot. Yeah, like it looks a little stubby, but like everything leading up to that is badass.
Like he's like, how did I get here? Like, and he's like,
yeah, he looks a little silly at the very, very end of it, but like everything leading up to that, banger, just goes fucking hard as hell.
Yeah, and as much as we're praising this movie, we should be fair. The premise and everything leading up to it is a little let down by the design of Ghost Rider in this movie. It's not bad, but it's just a big cartoon skeleton. Yeah. Like the skull is bleached white. Like
the fire effects themselves are pretty impressive for what they could do at the time. Unfortunately, it is just a case of like, the design lets it down a little bit because the cartoon skeleton head is just a little too white. It should have been a bit crispy like they did in the next movie, but we'll get to that eventually. But it needed a little bit more tweaking in the design phase. It's a little too clean, a little bit too superheroic for the movie that it's making. So,
hey everybody, Nick here, coming live from the editing bay. In typical No More Talking fashion, we couldn't stop talking about Ghost Rider. But honestly, when it comes to Nick Cage in this movie, they deserve nothing less. So we decided to break this episode up into 2 parts. We hope you enjoyed the first half, and we hope you join us again for our discussion next week as we continue to talk about Ghost Rider and why it rocks. Stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next episode of Heroic Efforts. Hey everybody, hope you enjoyed the show. If you did, please be sure to subscribe and leave a 5-star review. It really helps us out. And be sure to tune in next week for more Heroic Efforts. Heroic Efforts is a No More Talking production, all rights reserved.